You were looking at a bottle of rum called Maggie's Farm, but no, it's not from Bob Dylan, and the next couple of pictures are also going to be small businesses, I guess, small, I don't know, but anyway, named Maggie's Farm. The least surprising of the three, by the way, is a dispensary. Like, no way. Is it weird that I'm obsessive enough of a Bob Dylan fan to do these videos on this playlist? Deciding to climb the Mount Everest video essay project of doing one in-depth video for every single Bob Dylan song while never touching pot? Who knows? Let's move on. Maggie's Farm is obviously a milestone in Dylan's career, even though it wasn't his first electric song, and not just a case of going electric either, but going like full rock and roll. Well, obviously he kicked that door down as hard as possible, sent it flying off the hinges with Subterranean Homesick Blues, like we talked about in this video series. So why is Maggie's Farm considered such a milestone in his journey as not just a budding rock star, and, assumed to be one of the greatest rock stars of all time, but as an artist overall? Even people who aren't Dylan fans, just anyone who's a literate, if you will, rock and roll or history of rock and roll or history of the music of the 20th century fan could probably say why. Because of this music festival here. The venerable Newport Folk Festival. And yeah, because I'm recording this in December of 2024, I should probably mention that a major motion picture is hitting the theaters right now that is going to document that moment. Quick aside, I generally find these prestige music biopics to be well-made yet boring and formulaic, and unworthy of the subject matter they're covering. Add instantly overrated by the masses and critics for reasons I'll never understand to that list. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy them, and look at this image. That's a killer image. That is great. So I am excited about the movie overall, and more to the point for this video, yeah, it's going to show us this moment here. So here's a fictionalized version of the time in 1965 at the Newport Folk Festival that Bob unveiled Dylan the budding rock star on stage, certainly the first notable instance, and in front of an audience who was not expecting it. And this moment became the stuff of legends and is subject to many conflicting versions. There is no definitive account of what exactly happened. Were the people actually booing because they were so upset at him? Or were they booing because the sound quality was bad? Or was it because his set was too short and shorter than the others? Was Pete Seeger really so upset that he tried to smash the cables with an axe? No, of course not. Did he actually say that he wanted to? And if he did, was it because he was so mad at the performance, or because the sound quality was so bad? Some of those questions are easier to answer than others, some are unanswerable, and there's more, and that's not the point of the video, so we're not going to dive into all that. The important thing is that everybody agrees this was a dramatic moment. Dylan going to this folky festival, like the folky festival, and playing loud, fast, and electric. Festival that usually looks more like this. And yeah, of course, there was electric music at this festival. The blues bands would play electric, etc. The bottom line is Dylan completely subverted the audience's expectations about him. Because he wasn't just anyone at this festival, not even just any top-tier performer at this festival. No, he was the anointed, by them, Prince of American folk music, who was in real time, in their minds, accepting the crown, becoming the king, including through previous performances at Newport like this one here. Regardless then of the details of why they were booing, and it was probably complicated, maybe more than one reason, regardless then, there was definitely a real sense of betrayal. Obviously, there's plenty of evidence of that later on as he was touring Europe, etc. And so Maggie's Farm has all of that baggage loaded up on it, but there's another reason it's such a hallmark song. And it could be interpreted, Dylan's motive could be interpreted as playing that song specifically because it's a song about personal liberation, about living under the weight of the expectations of others, a yearning for freedom, not so much in the political sense, like in earlier songs from his catalog and the acoustic albums and the political albums, but in the personal and you might even say selfish sense, whereas singing about how other people deserve freedom could be seen as more selfless. Maggie's Farm is also a declaration. It's not just a complaint about expectations, it's a declaration that the narrator is no longer going to slave away to them, try to live up to them. That part is, I believe, inarguable. Arguable part is, did Dylan play this song at Newport to stick his thumb in the eye of the folk community, to really drive the point home, I'm not going to do what you want? Maybe, but I don't think we have any direct evidence of that whatsoever. And now with all that out of the way, because you really cannot discuss this song without talking about all of that, let's get to it. Maggie's Farm is comprised of 5 stanzas, 8 lines each, along a very formal blues structure, but musically there's more to it than that. It has 295 words, which makes it fairly lightweight for Dylan, and just under 4 minutes in runtime. And because it's taken as this song of liberation from the traditional folk movement, etc., it's kind of lumped in with Subterranean Homesick Blues as this just fast speed, fast and loud banger. And it's interesting because the music is pretty similar. Like the very start of this song, you might think it's the very start of Subterranean Homesick Blues. And I think this has not been commented on before, I think. This is one of those times where I'm like, man, you must be pulling this from some long-lost memory of a book or an article or something about this song. But anyway, I couldn't find it. The song has a decidedly languid aspect. And I feel that's a brilliant and, I'm guessing here, purposeful touch. What am I trying to say here? Like, the song is built for speed, but Dylan sings in kind of a slow, again, I'm guessing, purposefully lazy way, and I think that ties into the content of the song. Regarding the built for speed hypothesis or whatever, absolutely, go to YouTube and find the 4K restoration version of his performance at, yes, once again, the 1965 Newport Festival. And you will see what I mean. I mean, the song, he and I should have mentioned them earlier, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, who backed him in that performance, they just tear it up. I mean, it works really, really well. Working on this video here reminded me, it'd been a long time since I watched and listened to that performance. It's fantastic. Which, by the way, I don't get this, but I'm not an audiophile. All the complaints about the sound in the moment back then why does the performance sound so crystal clear when I listen to the recording? Like, I've listened to a lot of Dylan bootlegs in my day, right? Concert recordings, and oh, this one's great because it's right off the motherboard or whatever they call that stuff. And the sound quality is awful in the way that all live music sounds kind of bad and that is echoey and loud. But Dylan is as aggressive as any musical icon ever when it comes to changing up his songs live. We all know that. Anyway, yeah, he plays it very fast and loud at Newport. But you can play a song as many times as you want live in your many years and decades touring, but you only get to record it once, meaning you only get to choose one take to go on the album. And it seems to me musical artists would have a lot of intentionality around that choice. And so why is the music on the album version slower than it clearly could be? And why is his singing especially, why does it have that, to my ear, languid aspect? Well, I think that'll come out in the lyrics, so let's get to them. The key to the rhyme scheme overall is extremely easy to get. The first 2 lines and the last 2 lines of every stanza always rhyme. I mean, completely. It's the same sound in all 4 of those, and it's the same sound across all the stanzas. In other words, the or sound, as in Ain't Gonna Work on Maggie's Farm No More, ends the first 2 and last 2 lines of every section. And it gets even simpler than that because the word more, M-O-R-E, just like we see in this picture here, it rhymes with itself in the first and second line of every stanza. In fact, those first 2 lines always end with the phrase, no more. You know why? Because the first 2 lines in every stanza are the exact same line, just repeated, in an old folkloric blues convention. Let's go through the whole song top to bottom while just touching on that. I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. No, I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. Now let's jump to the last 2 lines of that stanza. It's a shame the way she makes me scrub the floor. I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. So really the same line occupies positions 1, 2, and 4. So it's even simpler than I said before, even more uniform. Top of the second stanza, I ain't gonna work for Maggie's brother no more. No, I ain't gonna work for Maggie's brother no more. So you don't have to be the amazing Kreskin. He just died this month, by the way. Rest in peace, Kreskin. To know what the final line is going to be. It's going to be that same line about the brother. The only mystery is, what's the penultimate line going to be? According to the official lyrics, it's, then he finds you every time you slam the door. I always thought that was, and he finds you every time you slam the door. But we've talked a million times about how Dylan will sing his own lyrics differently, including in the recording studio. Next stanza, ain't gonna work for Maggie's paw no more. Let's just skip to the penultimate line. The National Guard stands around his door. We'll definitely put a pin in that and come back to it. And then, of course, it ends with, I ain't gonna work for Maggie's paw no more. The next stanza is about Maggie's ma. You certainly get the pattern now, so let's just jump to the final couplet. She's 68, but she says she's 24. That's really fun. I think he did a better job on the actual album. What he sings in the recorded version is she's 68, but she says she's 54. It's a little less ridiculous than 24, but I like them both. It's funny, and this is by far the funniest and really only funny stanza in the song. But we'll get back to that. And I've talked so much in these videos about how Dylan has subtle hints that a song is wrapping up, using the lyrics instead of musically hitting you over the head and making it painfully obvious that the song is about to wrap up. Well, this time that happens because we're starting on what we don't know at the time is the final stanza, but we should notice the litany of family members is over, and this stanza begins with the same two lines that the song began with, so we've come full circle. And the penultimate line, they say sing while you slave and I just get bored. That line is a key to understanding this song and what it's about, and what it's about probably should lead us to the song's roots. Dylan modeled this song off of an old one, as he often does, and this was not meant to be esoteric, it was exoteric. He fully understood that all his contemporaries, and fans even, would know what he was doing here. Any decent folk music fan at the time would instantly say, ah, he's riffing on the old song Down on Penny's Farm, recorded in 1929. Preserved in something we've talked about a lot as well, the seminal Harry Smith's Anthology of American Folk Music, which was like the 60s folkies Bible, or one of the books of the Bible. The website Music from the Great Depression says the following, and notice the song was recorded by the Bentley Boys. The Bentley Boys recorded this song, and on the flip side, Hen House Blues in 1929. Almost nothing is known of them, except that they were from North Carolina. The song deals with sharecropping and over the years has lived several lives through parody and adaptation to other occupations, like Hard Times in the Mines. It probably originated as Lawson's Farm shortly after the Civil War ended, thematically related to My Name is John Johanna, also known as the state of Arkansas. I'm not quoting from that website anymore. Then, Harry Smith himself said the song was modeled off an earlier song called Hard Times. Makes sense. There was a group called the Skillet Lickers. How great is that? They made a song, or a version of this song, called Tanner's Farm. You get the idea. There were a lot of old songs built on this template. And by template, yes, I mean specifically about working on a farm and it sucks. And not just because it's hard work, but because I'm working myself to the bone and barely scraping by, never getting anywhere, all while the landowner gets richer. But there's a larger template and pattern where it's these songs about what this is about, but in a broader sense, and in other examples, economic exploitation. And if you're a fan of the old songs, then all of this is really obvious stuff, and you can think of even other songs to reference and pull into this. And back to Down on Penny's Farm, definitely the starting point for Dylan. But, interestingly, not musically, I would say. Musically, it was absolutely, and any Dylan fan knows this, the obvious starting point for Hard Times in New York Town. There, the musical and lyrical connection is obvious. Here, with Maggie's Farm, I think it's just more thematic, to use a word from one of our earlier quotations. Now let's dive back into the lyrics and see what we skipped the first time. First thing to notice is the internal rhyme, if you want to call it that. But anyway, right off the bat, I ain't. It's not I'm not. It's not I won't. I ain't. There's an internal, right? The I and the I sound. I'm not going to read the first two lines. We already covered that. Well, I wake up in the morning, fold my hands, and pray for rain. I got a head full of ideas that are driving me insane. It's a shame the way she makes me scrub the floor. I ain't going to work on Maggie's farm no more. Very short lines, and mostly what's going on kind of phonetically is that I ain't kind of a trick. Well, I wake up in the morning, or well, I wake in the morning. WW, well, I weigh. Right? Fold my hands and pray for rain. Pray for rain. It's a shame the way she makes me scrub the floor. It's a shame the way. Notice it isn't, it's a shame that she makes me scrub the floor. And in terms of content, yeah, if you're going to have to do this kind of drudgery all day long under a hot sun, you would love for there to be rain when you wake up in the morning. Like, okay, at least today I get a break. And the couplet about, I've got a head full of ideas that are driving me insane. A thought, no pun intended, that we've seen, or that we will see more than once in Dylan's songwriting. And we've dealt with the introduction about Maggie's farm and Maggie, because it's a shame the way she makes me scrub the floor. So now we move on to her brother. Jump to line 3. Well, he hands you a nickel, he hands you a dime. He asks you with a grin if you're having a good time. Then he fines you every time you slam the door. I ain't gonna work for Maggie's brother no more. So again, in terms of the sounds, well and nickel. Well, he hands you a nickel. Of course, I've talked about this before, but Dylan will have the first word and the last word of a single line rhyme with each other, and that's more complex than only making sure the ends of lines rhyme together. And it's important always with Dylan, but I think especially here, to see which words he stresses. So when he's singing this, it's, well, he hands you a nickel, he hands you a dime. And that sets us up for the next couplet. He asks you with a grin if you're having a good time. So he hands you a nickel, he hands you a dime. He asks you with a grin if you're having a good time. And the word he plays a role in all of this too, and the fact that he and have start with H. And hands. Yeah, so he, right? Let's count them up, fine. Well, he, that's one, hands you a nickel. He hands, so that's 4 on the next line. He, that's 5, asks you with a grin if you're having a good time. I don't even know where I ended. 6? So anyway, it's, what I've dealt with before. It's cool. Dylan ties lines together in so many more ways than just by making sure the words at the end of 2 lines rhyme. And you can see in this example, as opposed to the last one, it can go across multiple lines. It doesn't just have to be a couplet. And then, I can't remember if I said this or not, but, he finds you every time. Finds time. And these important penultimate lines that we talked about, in this case, it's this one, and he stresses the word finds. And he finds, like, the line lifts, his singing lifts for that part. Same as in the last stanza. It's a shame, like he really stresses shame, the way she makes me scrub the floor. So that's kind of the rhythm of the singing, if you will. And in terms of the content, we can see Maggie's brother. It's not just that he and the family are exploiting you. No, he's enjoying it. He's mocking you while really leaning into this power dynamic. Let's leave this picture up because it's such a great one while we just deal with Maggie's paw. While he puts his cigar out in your face just for kicks. His bedroom window, it is made out of bricks. The National Guard stands around his door. I ain't gonna work for Maggie's paw no more. The P sound and using it to start words, that's what predominates and propels things in the first half of this stanza. Yep, see what I did there? And anyway, this guy is clearly a sadistic jerk as well. The most noteworthy part is clearly that couplet about his bedroom window, it is made out of bricks. You're like, what is going on there? So I say you're wondering, but obviously it's pretty clear. 60s civil unrest, especially related to the civil rights movement. National Guard called out many times, like in this picture here, to try to keep the peace, and in some cases protect African Americans from the racist mobs that wanted to hurt them. And now let's get to the penultimate stanza and get to Maggie's ma. Well, she talks to all the servants about man and God and law. Everybody says she's the brains behind Pa. She's 68, but she says she's 24. Well, we already dealt with this earlier. That last bit. At least to me, it seems that in terms of the tricks he's playing with sound, this is very similar to the last stanza, but different. Last time it was about the P sound, which starts as the very first letter in these words, right? Like paw, put, paw. This is different. It's ma, but it's not about the M, it's about the A, right? I ain't gonna work for Maggie's ma no more. He really stresses that. No, I ain't gonna work for Maggie's ma no more. Well, she talks to all the servants about man and God and law. Right? So the A. Everybody says she's the brains behind a paw. So funny, he uses ma and paw in 2 very different ways, and you really would be forgiven for not noticing that. To me, the most interesting part is the couplet, well, she talks to all the servants about man and God and law. And I'll use that as the springboard to talk about my thoughts on the overall point of the song and the message. To me, and I don't think this has been thrown out there before, this is a song about slavery and the fact that slavery hasn't actually gone away. And of course, there's more than one thing going on with the song. Yes, I do agree it's a song about Dylan's personal artistic liberation, but I also think the genesis of the song was not that at all. Not him thinking about Down on Penny's Farm and then reworking it into something that is him speaking about how he wants to break free from, how he's been pigeonholed. No, I definitely can't say definitively, but I think the subject matter of Down on Penny's Farm and that kind of folk tradition, Dylan looked at current times and the plight of African Americans and updated it. Sharecropping, service industry, things like that. It's the new slavery. Look how cruel Maggie's brother and pa get to be to the quote-unquote servants. That means black servants. And it's like Sir Christopher Ricks noted about The Lonesome Death of Hetty Carroll. It's a terrible truth that Dylan doesn't have to point out the races in the song. You instantly know Williams and Zinger must have been white and Hetty Carroll must have been black. Anyway, back to this updating. Things are better. You definitely have way more legal rights than you had in the antebellum South, and they are paying you, etc., but it's still the same overall dynamic. And why do I think those lines about Ma or a good springboard for talking about all of this, because he writes about his obsession with the Civil War. There's no way her preaching to the servants isn't supposed to be an echo of how slave owners would preach to their slaves. If you've never read the book 12 Years a Slave, of course an Oscar-winning movie was made off of it, but the book is amazing. And, Solomon Northup talks about that, like the one day you get off, one day out of the week is Sunday, because it's the Lord's Day. And I'm riffing now, by the way. I'm also obsessed with history, as this is not so much in the book. What was compulsory on Sunday? Well, you had to go to church, or you had to at least get preached to about how God is a kind, loving Father. And we live the way he wants, and this is what he wants. And don't let that bother you, slave. Like, if he's so kind and loving, why am I living in abject misery? Systematic working to death of everyone, rape of the women, breaking up of families. Let us, the people in power, tell you about how this is all part of what God wants. This is part of how it should be with man and law and God. Okay, let's get to the final stanza. 20 minutes ago or so, we talked about the device Dylan uses to subtly indicate that that's what we're moving into. Well, I try my best to be just like I am, but everybody wants you to be just like them. We've returned to Dylan, as opposed to going through Maggie and all her relatives. We've returned to the narrative of the song, and here Dylan superimposes, I believe, his personal feelings at the moment about his artistic journey onto the character in the song. And finally, penultimate line, the last of the penultimate lines, they say, sing while you slave, and I just get bored. I think the word slave, like I said a long time ago, is very purposeful there. As is no doubt the word sing, right? He's a singer, and the expectations that are on him as a singer, but there's that American history, civil rights tie in as well, because I think we're clearly supposed to think about what were called Negro spirituals. Anyone the least bit familiar with Civil War history and, lead up to the Civil War, basically American history, should definitely think of that. When you hear the line, they say sing while you slave, like, that's a no-brainer. And let's end with that line and a note about sound, right? They say, right? There you go. Once again. And not just that, but they say sing while you slave. By the way, I should have mentioned, in the official lyrics, it only says, they sing while you slave, and I just get bored. Well, it actually works either way. I think it works better the way he sings it on the official recording, but it works this way as well in the printed lyrics. If you are one of the slaves and everyone around you is singing, yeah, but I still hate this. And let's really finish now with a tiny little bit of trivia about the song's title. We talked about the song Tradition with the different farms where you're being exploited, right? So why Maggie's Farm? Is that just something totally random? It's postulated that's a play on the fact that he had sung at a place called Silas McGee's Farm in 1963. Maggie's Farm, an important song tied to a very important moment in Dylan's career. A song that, in my opinion, is about him seeking his personal liberty, but also sympathizing with people who needed a heck of a lot more, African Americans, during this time. And if I'm onto something there, I think that's something that's really been missed in most, if not all, of the existing commentary about this song. Specifically the sharecropping, etc., as the new slavery. It's much easier to just get tangled up, see what I did there, in the personal, artistic aspect of this song. Let's go back to another image from the upcoming movie. What perfect timing, especially for this song. But remember, way back at the start of the video, so we've come full circle, I talked about how Dylan sings languidly, like he draws out his words. And it's very reminiscent of a lot of the songs on Another Side of Bob Dylan, where he was famously imbibing plenty of red wine, and it could be heard in his singing. So why do I think that kind of singing is appropriate to this subject matter? Well, our protagonist that Dylan as artist kind of piggybacks onto, but the protagonist he invented, remember, this person isn't enraged, they're not rebellious about this crushing system that they're working under. No, he's just bored. The work is boring, the long days are boring, everything about it. And I think that's an interesting and unexpected take and kind of insightful on what it would be like to be that person. Just the overwhelming monotony of that life. And then, of course, this is where the artist meets the protagonist, right? Dylan feels, I think, things have gotten monotonous with the kind of music he was making before. And we're done, like I said, full circle. Maggie's Farm, an important song in Dylan's catalog and career. And be interesting to see how that moment is portrayed in this movie here. Thanks.